She had hunted monsters since she was old enough to hold a blade. He had ruled the wild north since before her grandmother was born. Neither of them believed in fate. Neither of them believed in love. But when an ancient curse, older than language itself, begins to unravel the boundary between the living and the dead, when wolves drop at the border of his territory and humans vanish from their beds, there is only one way to stop it: the hunter and the Wolf King, bound together forever. The only problem? She would rather die than surrender to him, and he would rather burn the world down than kneel for anyone. But the curse does not care what either of them wants. It only cares that its price is paid. Welcome to Enchanted Secrets Publishing. If you are here for the first time, welcome. You have arrived at exactly the right place. Subscribe now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a release, and settle in, because the story that follows is going to keep you here until the very last word. Chapter 1. The trap was her best work. Serafina had spent 3 days setting it, concentric rings of silver-threaded wire buried beneath 6 inches of mountain snow, triggered pressure plates disguised as frost-hardened earth, and at the center, a single iron stake anchored so deeply into the frozen ground that not even an alpha could rip it free without exposing himself to a lethal dose of silver through his palms. She had not slept in those 3 days. She had eaten twice. She had not once doubted it would work. Now, crouched in the hollow of a dead spruce 50 yards upwind, she watched the forest breathe. The northern packs moved differently from lowland wolves. They were quieter, more deliberate, with none of the adolescent recklessness that made most rogues easy prey. The wolves of the Ashfall territory had been here before humans thought to name mountains, and they moved through the dark with the patience of things that understood geological time. Serafina respected that about them. She intended to neutralize their king anyway. The kill order had come from the Northern Hunters Compact 3 weeks ago, handed to her in a sealed black envelope by her handler, Devereaux. The briefing was 4 pages. She read it twice and memorized it completely before feeding it to a flame. Zane Ashfall, Alpha of the Ashfall Pack. 31 documented incidents involving registered hunters. Territorial violations across 4 jurisdictions. Suspected orchestrator of the Coldmere incident. 11 humans found at the edge of Packlands, their deaths ruled natural by a coroner the Compact suspected was compromised. She had asked only one question: do you want him dead or captured? Devereaux had looked at her for a long moment. Captured, if possible. Dead, if necessary. She had not said which she planned to deliver. That was 3 weeks ago. Tonight the trees to the east shifted, not wind. Wind moved all the trees at once in a ripple, democratic and indifferent. This was a single disturbance, one point of pressure in the forest grid, moving with the practiced silence of an apex predator who knew that silence itself was a weapon. Serafina did not move. She did not breathe. She existed in the space between heartbeats and waited. He came out of the dark like something the forest had been holding in reserve. She had read the file. She had studied the surveillance photographs. She had believed she was prepared for the physical reality of him. She was not. Zane Ashfall was enormous. Not in the cartoonish way of low-rank wolves puffed with aggression, but in the way of something fundamentally built at a different scale. His shoulders were broad, his posture without strain, as though he had never once in his life held himself small. His hair was dark and snow-dusted. And his eyes, even from 50 yards in the dark, were the specific grey-amber of a November sky at the exact moment before a storm decides whether to snow. He was not in wolf form, unusual for a patrol at this altitude. He walked as a man, hands at his sides, his breath a steady, visible cloud. No weapons she could see. He stopped. He was exactly at the outer edge of the first ring. He raised his chin and turned slightly, testing the air. She felt the hairs on her neck rise. She had positioned herself perfectly upwind. There was no possible way he had caught her scent. And yet something about the angle of his head suggested he was looking directly at the spruce she was hiding in. He smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had already won a game the other party did not know was being played. He said, "All with perfect calm, across 50 yards of mountain dark, I know you are there. I have known since you arrived 3 days ago. I have been watching you work. You are very good." Serafina did not move. "The trap is excellent," he continued, taking a single step forward, exactly onto the first pressure plate, placing 5 pounds where 8 were needed to trigger it. "Silver-threaded wire. Very elegant. You buried the stake at 37 degrees off vertical, which means you anticipated me approaching from the northwest. You read the wind correctly 3 days ago. Tonight the wind changed. He was standing in the center of the trap. She triggered it. The concentric rings collapsed inward in a cascade, wire singing through the snow, the pressure plates firing in sequence. The iron stake releasing a secondary catch she had not made visible in any of the rigging, because it was the actual mechanism, and the rest was misdirection. The chain that emerged from the stake was 12 feet long, reinforced, with a silver alloy cuff at the end that locked automatically on contact. It locked around his right wrist. He looked down at it with the expression of a man who had ordered the wrong meal at a restaurant. "There it is," he said. Serafina dropped from the tree. She landed cleanly, silver blade already in her right hand, and covered the 50 yards in 10 seconds. She stopped 6 feet away, close enough to use the blade, far enough to have half a second of reaction time. She held the detonator for the secondary charges in her left hand. 3 kilos of silver-laced explosive buried under the stake. On your knees," she said. He looked at her. Those storm-grey eyes moved over her face with thoroughness that was not hostile. It was evaluative, the way an architect looks at a building. She had the infuriating sense of being found interesting. "On your knees or I detonate the secondary charge," she said. "I want to find out exactly how much silver it takes to drop an alpha." A pause. Something moved in his expression. Not quite amusement, not quite respect, but the specific quality of attention that comes with encountering something unexpected. He knelt, not in the way of someone submitting. He lowered himself to one knee with the deliberate grace of a man choosing to sit, preserving every ounce of dignity that kneeling theoretically stripped away. She had seen true submissions before. This was not one. This was a tactical calculation, and he was deciding for now that her terms were acceptable. It was more unsettling than defiance would have been. "What is your name, Hunter?" he asked. "You do not get my name. Then I will call you Sparrow. You move like one. I will shoot you." "No," he said with absolute certainty. "You want me alive. I want to be alive. We have one thing in common. Let us see if we can find a second." She restrained him, blindfolded him, and had him moving within 4 minutes. She had done this before, walked a captive through mountain darkness with only their breathing for company. She had never had one who walked this calmly. He did not trip, he did not drag his feet. He matched her pace with an eerie precision, as though he could see through the blindfold, as though the chain between them was not a restraint, but a connection he had chosen. The wind came down from the high peaks carrying the first serious cold of December. The vehicle was ahead. The safe house in the mountains was stocked for a week. She had everything she needed to hold one alpha. What she did not have, what she had no way of anticipating, was the thing that would happen at 3:17 in the morning when the temperature dropped below the threshold that had not been crossed in 400 years, and the ancient words carved into the stone beneath the mountain began to glow. Chapter 2. The mountain safe house was not, by most standards, a safe house. It was a fortress. Serafina had acquired it 3 years ago from the Compact's confiscated assets, a former Wolfpack stronghold whose previous occupants had been dismantled by a joint hunter operation she had led at 24. The architecture was pre-industrial. stone walls 4 feet thick, set into the north face of the Ashfall Range at an elevation accessible only by the reinforced vehicle she currently drove. The windows were narrow and iron-barred. The single door was oak and silver alloy and could withstand 4 hours of sustained assault from a full pack. The basement held a cell she had retrofitted with silver-threaded bars, a silver-coated floor drain, and lighting that could strobe, useful for disorienting a wolf's heightened senses. She led Zane Ashfall through the front door, removed the blindfold and brought him to the cell. He stood in the centre and looked around with the slow, comprehensive attention of a man taking inventory of a place he intended to understand completely. He looked at the bars, the ceiling, the floor drain, the strobe fixture, with the expression of someone noting a mildly irritating detail. Then he looked at her. "This is well designed," he said. "You have eliminated most of the conventional escape options in the first 3 feet of entry. The silver coating on the floor drain is particularly thoughtful. Most hunters miss that. Sit down." "Where would you like me to sit?" She gestured at the narrow cot. He crossed to it and sat with ease that suggested the cot's plainness was entirely beneath his concern. His wrists were still cuffed. He set them on his knees and watched her with the patient attention of a man who had nowhere else to be. "Why did you walk into the trap?" she asked. She had been waiting to ask since the moment she saw him step onto the first pressure plate. He tilted his head. "Because you set it, because I wanted to see what you would do when I did, and because the Compact has been sending hunters into my territory for 6 months, and none of them were you. I was curious about the difference." "The difference?" "The others came to kill me and hoped to capture me. You came to capture me and were prepared to kill me if necessary. That is a different kind of hunter." He paused. "What changed? Why does the Compact want me alive?" She did not answer. "You do not know," he said, observational, not unkind. "They do not tell you everything. They tell me what I need to do the job. And yet you are here with the North's most dangerous alpha and no idea why you were not given a kill order." He considered this. "Interesting." She went upstairs to the main room. She ran a check on the perimeter sensors. 4 of them triggered, wolves moving at distance but not approaching. The Ashfall pack knew their alpha had been taken. They were watching. She sent an encrypted message to Devereaux. "Assets secured. Holding at sight, Charlie. Awaiting extraction timeline." The reply took 11 minutes, 7 longer than normal. When it came, it was 3 words. "Stand by. Complications." She looked at those 3 words for a long time. She went to the kitchen, made coffee, black, 2 cups, a habit from childhood because her mother had always made 2, one for herself and one that sat cooling on the counter for the shape of company, and carried one downstairs. She set it inside the cell door without opening the cuff slot. If he wanted it, he could reach through the bars. He looked at the cup, then at her. "Poisoned? I do not need to poison you. I have silver bars and locks." He reached through the bars and picked up the cup. He drank without checking it, which she noted. Either he trusted her, or he did not fear what she might do to him. She suspected the second. "You are not what I expected," he said. "I know what you expected. Someone like the others. Someone who hates me." The word landed with unexpected directness. She kept her expression neutral. "I was trained to neutralize supernatural threats. Hate is inefficient." "Your mother was killed by a wolf." He said it simply, or without performance. "I know who you are, Serafina Voss. The Compact's best. The hunter who does not feel anything. The one they send when the others have failed." The sound of her name in his mouth was strange. She had not told it to him. She had not expected him to already have it. "If you know who I am," she said, "then you know I will hold you here as long as necessary and hand you to the Compact without hesitation." "Yes," he said. "I know that too. It makes you more interesting, not less." She went upstairs. She was reading the Compact's briefing files for the 4th time when the fortress shook. Not like an earthquake. Not a horizontal vibration, but a vertical resonance, a sound below sound that seemed to come from directly beneath the foundation. The walls did not crack. Nothing fell. But the vibration moved through the stone and into the soles of her feet, and up through her legs and into her chest, and she felt it there, just below her sternum, like a tuning fork pressed against her ribs. Then it stopped. She was on her feet with both weapons drawn before she consciously decided to stand. She moved to the window. Outside, nothing. The forest was still. She went downstairs. Zane was standing in the center of his cell. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the floor. His expression, for the first time since she had captured him, was not composed. It was something she had not expected to see on a wolf king's face. Fear. "What was that?" she asked. He looked up slowly. The storm-grey eyes had gone very dark. "That," he said quietly, "was the Varrock curse. And we have a significant problem." Chapter 3. She sat on the other side of the bars while he talked, because she was not going to open the cell for a conversation, regardless of how calm he appeared. The torchlights in the corridor cast long shadows, and his voice came to her through the silver-threaded bars with a low resonance she was careful not to find soothing. The Varrock curse, he explained, was not a myth. She had grown up hearing about it as exactly that. A myth, an embellishment of pack oral tradition. The Compact's official position was that all pre-modern supernatural contracts were cultural artifacts with no active metaphysical force. She had filed that position in the category of things the Compact believed for bureaucratic convenience rather than demonstrated fact. The curse had been placed on the Ashfall bloodline 4 centuries ago by a practitioner of the old bond magic, a woman named Varrock, who had been the mate of his 4 times great-grandfather, the first Ashfall Alpha. When that Alpha deliberately severed the bond, a violence against the mate connection that the old magic treated as a fundamental breach, Varrock had spent the last 3 years of her life constructing a punishment. Not for him specifically, for all of them, for every generation that followed. "Every generation," Zane said, "the curse is renewed. As long as the Ashfall Alpha finds and acknowledges his fated mate, the curse sleeps. If it is not renewed, if an Alpha passes through the window without completing the acknowledgement, the curse activates." What is the window? A specific alignment of temperature and date. It happens once per decade. The last window was the December my father died. He completed the acknowledgement 2 hours before his death. I inherited the obligation and the 10-year clock. Tonight, he paused. His jaw tightened. Tonight is the 1st of December. She was ahead of him. The temperature dropped below threshold tonight. Below -14 Celsius at elevation. That is the environmental trigger. He looked at her steadily. "The curse is now active, Seraphina. Then find your mate and complete the acknowledgement. Problem solved." His expression did not change. It remained perfectly composed, which was precisely how she knew the next thing he said was going to be terrible. "I have," he said. A long silence. "I have found her. The curse activated because she was present at the window. The magic requires both parties within proximity when the threshold is crossed. The fact that it activated at all means my fated mate was here tonight. In this fortress." He held her gaze with the level, unblinking attention of someone delivering information they know will not be well received. "It means the curse has identified her." She was standing before she knew she had stood. "No. I understand this is not your preferred outcome. I am a hunter. I was raised to hunt creatures like you. My mother was killed by a member of your species when I was 7 years old. I am holding you in a cell. I am absolutely not your fated mate." "The mate bond does not ask for background checks," he said. There was something in the evenness of his voice that was not amusement but something older, the quality of a man who had been sitting with a truth he did not want for longer than one night. I have known since I scented you in the forest 3 days ago. I told myself it was proximity. I told myself the alignment had not happened yet. I walked into your trap because—" He stopped. Because? Because I needed to be certain. And the moment the cuff closed on my wrist, the bond settled into place. You are my fated mate, Serafina Voss. She paced the corridor 4 times, then stopped. What does the curse do while active? He had been waiting for her to ask the practical question. She watched him respect this, the way a hunter processes horror by moving immediately to what can be done about it. At first, decay. Either land between packs, the unclaimed border zones, begins to die. The cold does not break. Animals that cross the border zones do not come back. Within 2 weeks, humans at the margins begin to experience symptoms that look like illness, but are deeper than illness. Within a month, the border wolves start to lose coherence, their shifts become involuntary, their reasoning unstable. Within 6 weeks, they die. She was very still. How many border wolves? 43 in the immediate zones. Beyond them, the human populations in Cold Hollow and Vansburg. Perhaps 1,200 people. And how is it stopped? He looked at her. The answer was in the silence before he spoke it. A man who understood that what he was about to say would change everything, who was choosing to say it anyway because he was not a coward. So the curse requires the completion of the mate bond, not just acknowledgement. Completion. A full bond, performed in the place where the curse was originally cast. Which is where? The stone chamber beneath this fortress, he said. Varric chose this location deliberately. She knew the Ashfall line would always return to it. The former owners of this building, the pack you dismantled 3 years ago, were a cadet branch of mine. She anticipated the curse would eventually come to rest exactly here. Serafina looked at the stone floor beneath her feet. There is a chamber under this building. 3 levels down, sealed with old magic until the curse activates. It is open now. She crossed to the cell door. She unlocked it. He raised his eyebrows. You are going to show me, she said. And then you are going to explain every detail of what completing this bond actually involves. Because if you are lying to me about any part of this, I will end you regardless of whatever the magic claims you are to me. Do you understand? He stood from the cot. I understand. And Serafina. I am not lying to you. I have never in 31 years wished more profoundly that I was. She led him upstairs. They moved through the stone corridors with the focused efficiency of 2 people concentrating very hard on only the next immediate problem. The stone floor in the kitchen was cold even through her boots. Somewhere beneath it, 4 centuries of waiting were ending. Chapter 4. The entrance was in the larder. She had used this fortress for 3 years. She had mapped every room, tested every wall, measured every corridor. She had found the larder useful for cold storage and had never looked at its flagstone floor as anything other than flagstone. Now, with Zane standing behind her, she pressed her palm flat against the 3rd stone from the north wall as he instructed. And the floor dropped. Not all of it. A 3-foot square section, hinged along one invisible seam, swung downward on a mechanism she could not identify because it was not mechanical. No springs, no counterweights, just the stone moving because the magic had recognized that the curse was active and the relevant parties had arrived. She went first, not because she was fearless. She was not, and she had learned long ago that fear and courage were not opposites, but because she needed to assess the space before allowing an uncuffed alpha into it, and regardless of what the old magic apparently thought of their relationship. The first level below was a root cellar, clearly pre-existing. She moved through it quickly. A second staircase carved directly from the mountain rock led to a second level that had clearly been constructed with deliberate ceremony. Smooth walls, carved figures she did not recognize, the air carrying a pressure that was not physical, but was nonetheless real. The specific weight of a place where significant things had been done repeatedly over a long time. The third level was a chamber. It was not large, perhaps 20 feet in diameter, circular, with a ceiling low enough that Zane had to duck through the entrance. The walls were covered from floor to ceiling in inscriptions she could not read. The floor was flat stone with 2 markings at its centre, a circle within a circle, and inside the inner ring, 2 symbols that were clearly paired, mirror images, each incomplete without the other. In the centre of the chamber, on a stone plinth, was a book. Not a modern book. Something older, bound in material she did not want to identify, inscribed on the front cover with the same script as the walls, thick with pages that had clearly been read and reread and annotated across multiple generations. "The Varek record," Zane said from behind her. He had stepped into the chamber and stopped at the edge of the inscribed circle, not entering it. 4 centuries of Ashfall alphas documenting the curse, the windows, the bonds, everything we know about what it requires. She looked at the 2 paired symbols on the floor. Completing the bond. Walk me through exactly what that means. He was quiet for a moment. She turned to find him watching her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not the composed, evaluative attention of their first hours together, but something more careful, something that was treating her as fragile without condescending to her, which she found, despite herself, respectful. "The bond has stages," he said. "The mate recognition, which has already occurred, as of tonight. The formal acknowledgement, which requires the alpha to verbally claim his mate in the presence of the curse's marker. And the completion, which requires an exchange." An exchange of what? He looked at the floor, choosing words with obvious care. Blood, breath, touch. In the old magic. And those 3 things together constitute what they called a life-sharing, the physical act of making the bond real rather than theoretical. It does not require anything beyond what I have described. The magic is specific. Blood from the wrist, breath shared at proximity, a sustained touch lasting 3 minutes by the old counting. A touch, hands joined, in the centre of the circle, for 3 minutes. She looked at the inscribed circle. She looked at the paired symbols. She looked at him. And this stops the curse. This stops the curse, dissolves the bond obligation from my bloodline permanently, and the 43 border wolves and the 1,200 humans at the margins go on with their lives without knowing they were ever in danger. What does it do to us? He met her eyes directly. The bond becomes permanent. Our mate bonds completed through this ritual cannot be severed. Not by the compact, not by pack law, not by choice. We would be bound. For life. The chamber was very quiet. The inscriptions on the walls seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. "I want 24 hours, she said. "To do what?" "To verify. I am going to read that record. I am going to contact an independent source I trust, not the compact. I am going to confirm the timeline, the nature of the curse, and the consequences of inaction. If everything you have told me is accurate, we will discuss our options." A pause. "You said options. Plural. There are always options. I do not yet know what they are. Give me 24 hours. He nodded once. 24 hours. While you research, I need to send a message to my pack. And my second is capable of managing the border wolves if she knows what is happening, but she needs to hear from me. If she does not receive word by morning, she will bring 80 wolves to this mountain. How do you intend to send a message from inside a cell? Mind link. I can reach her from here. But I will need 10 minutes of concentration, and I would prefer not to be behind silver bars while I do it. She looked at him for a long moment. You could run. I could, he agreed. I could also allow 80 wolves to come to this mountain, which would complicate everything we have just agreed to figure out. I have as much interest in this conversation continuing as you do. She brought him upstairs. She made more coffee. She set the Varek record on the main table. She sat across from Zane while he closed his eyes and went still with the specific inward focus of deep mind link and she opened the book, and she read. It took 6 hours. By the time the mountain's dawn was greying the narrow windows, she had read the full record, cross-referenced it against 3 sources she had reached through secure channels. A practitioner of the old magic named Thessaly, who owed her a debt, and who confirmed in her careful and entirely unjudgmental way every detail Zane had provided. The curse was real. The timeline was real. The requirement was real. She closed the book. "Everything you told me is accurate," she said. "Yes. I need one more thing before I can agree to this." "Name it." She looked at him steadily. "Tell me about the Coldmere incident, the 11 humans. And I need to know if you ordered it." The storm-grey eyes held hers without flinching, without looking away, without the micro-expressions of deflection she had been trained to read. "I did not," he said. "I know who did. It was my cousin, acting without my knowledge or sanction. He is no longer in my pack. He is no longer anywhere." She held his gaze for 10 seconds. She was very good at reading lies. He was not lying. 24 hours is not enough time, she said, but it is all we have. Chapter 5. The second night in the fortress was different from the first. He was no longer in the cell. She had not formally released him. She had not said the words or filed any of the 6 forms that officially constituted prisoner release. He was simply no longer behind the silver bars. And she was no longer pretending the distance between the cell and the main room was anything other than a decision she had made. She told herself it was tactical. He had information she needed. He had demonstrated across 36 hours a pattern of behaviour that was either genuine trustworthiness or the most sophisticated manipulation she had ever encountered. Either way, she needed proximity to assess which. She told herself this while watching him cook. He had located the supplies she had stocked for the week, nothing elaborate, a hunter's larder, and had produced from them something that smelled significantly better than anything she would have made with the same ingredients. He moved in the narrow kitchen with the efficient economy of someone who had learned to do things properly a long time ago. "You cook," she said. She was at the table with the Varek record, not for the first time. "My pack's cook died in a winter outbreak 12 years ago. I had a choice between learning and going hungry, and I am not good at going hungry." She looked at him. "You cook for your own pack." "On occasion. Mostly I cook for myself. The Alpha's kitchens are in the main house. I live at the West Tower." He set a bowl in front of her without ceremony. "Eat. You have been awake for 40 hours. She ate. It was, in fact, very good. "The compact is going to come looking for me," she said. "I know. They will come looking for you too. When they realise their hunter has gone dark with the asset, they will send a team." "How long do we have?" 4 days before the silence triggers a welfare check. Another day for a team to reach this altitude." She set down her spoon. "We have 5 days. The curse timeline is 6 weeks. We have time." To decide. To decide. He sat across from her. He had not eaten yet. He was waiting, she realised. Not the behaviour of a wolf king accustomed to being served. The behaviour of a man who had grown up without privilege and found the lack of it unremarkable. "Tell me about your mother," he said. The sentence landed like a stone in still water. "Why?" "Because you have been sitting with a version of me, built entirely from a compact briefing and the fact that you hate what I am. I would like you to have something more accurate, and the way to begin that is usually an exchange. Tell me about your mother, and I will tell you something true about the Ashfall pack that the compact has wrong in their files." She was quiet for a while. The fire in the main room's hearth had been burning for hours, and the stone walls had absorbed enough heat that the fortress was, for the first time, genuinely warm. "She was a researcher," Serafina said. "She studied the border zones between pack territories and human settlements. She believed that most of the violence could be traced to specific failure points, specific moments when protocol broke down, when packs were under pressure, when the wrong individuals were in the wrong place. She thought the violence was solvable. A systems problem, not a species problem." She sounds like someone worth knowing. She was. A pause. The wolf that killed her was a rogue. No pack affiliation. He had been expelled from 3 different packs for violent behaviour and was travelling the border zones during a period when the compact's patrol frequency had been reduced due to budget cuts. She was alone. She had a sidearm with 2 silver rounds, and she had 3 minutes of warning, and none of that was enough. She said it evenly. She had said it many times over many years, and the evenness was real, was earned. She was 31 years old. I was 7. He was quiet. He did not offer condolences. She respected this. The wolf who killed her was not a member of your pack, she said. No. You checked. The moment I knew who you were, I checked. It seemed important to know. He looked at her steadily. I do not expect that to change anything. The species that killed your mother is the species I am. But the individual was not mine. I want you to have the accurate version. Tell me the thing the compact has wrong, she said. He was quiet for a moment, choosing. The Coldmere incident. The compact believes it was pack orchestrated, but the officer who filed the initial report, a compact hunter named Roth, was paid to file it incorrectly. Not by me. By a development group that has been trying to claim the Coldmere territory for 3 years and needs the pack presence there legally dissolved. The 11 humans who died were killed by a human operative, not a wolf. The forensics were altered. She stared at him. I have the documentation, he said. I have had it for 4 months. I was trying to determine the safest way to surface it without triggering the exact response that triggered anyway. The compact sending their best hunter to remove me before I could. If that is true, she said slowly, then the compact was set up. I was set up. I was sent here to neutralize a threat that does not exist so that the real threat could continue operating. She walked to the window and looked out at the mountain dark. She thought about 3 weeks ago and the black envelope and Devereaux's handwriting and those 3 words, stand by, complications. She thought about 43 wolves at the border, 1,200 people in Cold Hollow and Viansburg. A curse 400 years old that had just activated because 2 people who should never have been in the same room were in the same room. She thought about her mother, or 31 years old, who had believed the violence was solvable. She turned away from the window. Show me the documentation, she said. Chapter 6. He had the documentation in his pack's secure archive, accessible via an encrypted device his second had left in a drop package at a deadfall 3 miles from the fortress. He unlocked it, biometric, and spread the contents on the table. She spent 4 hours going through the documents. He sat across from her and answered every question she asked, and did not ask questions of his own, which was either impressive restraint or evidence that he understood she needed to work through information sequentially and would offer her conclusions when she was ready. The documentation was damning, comprehensive, and entirely credible. The development group, Vantara Holdings, incorporated in 3 jurisdictions, had been operating in the Coldmere region for 2 years. Their land acquisition strategy required the removal of the Ashfall Pack's protected territorial claim. The simplest way under compact law was to have the pack designated a Class 7 threat, the classification that triggered mandatory dissolution protocols. Class 7 required documented evidence of unprovoked human casualties. The 11 people at Coldmere had been reported missing by their families over 3 weeks. Their bodies had been found at the pack territory boundary with wounds that a compromised coroner classified as consistent with wolf attack. An independent forensic analysis commissioned by Zane showed the wounds were post-mortem. The victims had died elsewhere of causes consistent with extreme cold exposure and had been transported to the boundary location after death. They were killed in the mountains, Serafina said, in Vantara's extraction zone. Their equipment showed evidence of being at high altitude, well above any pack territory. The coldest section of the ranges is where Vantara has been drilling test wells. She looked at the drilling permits, the land survey maps, the photograph of the original compact report, and then the comparison analysis, and then the financials showing Roth, the hunter who had filed the initial report, receiving a transfer of €40,000 from a Vantara subsidiary account. She sat back. Devereaux. My handler? I do not know if he is involved, Zane said. What I know is that the order to capture me was filed 2 days after Vantara's internal communications show a discussion about accelerating the compact action timeline. The timing is difficult to explain as coincidence. She thought about the 6 months of hunters sent into the Ashfall territory before her, all of them working kill orders, all of them reassigned after failure. Only she given the capture order. She had thought it was recognition of her skill. It might have been something else entirely. She might have been sent here to disappear. A hunter who died attempting a capture would not be the compact's first loss. The record would show she was killed in the field. The capture order would close. Vantara would get their Class 7. The pack would be dissolved. The territory would open to development, and no one would account for 11 bodies in a drill site valley. She was very still for a long time. Then she looked at Zane. You knew this before you walked into the trap. I knew some of it. I knew you were likely being used without your knowledge. A pause. I walked into the trap because I wanted to make contact with you, not to be captured. I could have left the territory entirely. I stayed because I needed to tell someone in the compact what I had found, and you are the best person in the compact. And I thought, he stopped. You thought that the hunter most likely to believe evidence against the compact's own operations was the one with the most personal reason to be angry that she had been used. Yes, he looked at her directly. When I have been watching the compact's operations for years, you are the only hunter whose field reports show consistent pattern recognition rather than confirmation bias. You were the right person to tell. She stood and went to the window. The mountain was bright with reflected snow, and the early morning had turned the sky a cold, deep blue. The curse was active. 43 wolves and 1,200 humans on a 6-week clock. She had 4 days before the compact's welfare check. She had documentation that, if properly surfaced, could dismantle Vantara's operation and clear the Ashfall Pack's designation. She had a practitioner contact who could verify. She had, sitting across a kitchen table from her with a mug of coffee and the patience of someone who had decided to trust her with everything. At the most dangerous alpha in the northern packs, who was apparently her fated mate. She nearly laughed. She did not laugh. All right, she said. Here is what we are going to do. First, I am going to send this documentation to a journalist, not the compact, not any government agency that might be compromised. Someone I have used before who is completely outside these systems. Second, I am going to send a copy to Thessaly, who can hold it as an independent backup. Third, I am going to contact the compact on my own terms through a channel Devereaux does not control. And the curse? She turned to face him. The early light came through the narrow window and caught in the grey amber of his eyes, and she looked at it deliberately, the way she sometimes looked at things she needed to stop being afraid of. Directly, until the fear converted into something else. The curse is the next problem, she said. One problem at a time. He nodded. And then, for the first time in 2 days, the corner of his mouth moved in something that was almost a smile. You are going to be extraordinary, he said. He said it the way he said most things, quietly, evenly, as a statement of observed fact. When this is over, whatever it looks like, you are going to be extraordinary. She looked at him for a moment too long. Then she sat back down and began to write. Chapter 7. By the third night, the fortress had become something different than it was on the first night. It was not that the walls changed. It was not that the silver bars dissolved or the locks retracted or the weapons she carried became less sharp. Or it was something subtler and therefore more dangerous. The rooms had been navigated and re-navigated until they had the quality of familiar space and familiar space changes what a person will say aloud in it. She had sent the documents. Her journalist contact confirmed receipt and verification. Thessaly confirmed the independent backup. The channel to the Compact's Oversight Division had delivered 3 hours of silence, followed by a notification that her report had been received, which was either meaningless bureaucracy or evidence that someone above Devereaux was paying attention. She had done everything she could do from inside a mountain. Now there was the remaining problem. She found him in the lower corridor, outside the larder entrance, sitting on the floor with his back against the stone wall and his eyes closed. Not sleeping. She had learned the difference. When he slept, his breathing went long and even and his hands opened. When he was thinking, his breathing stayed shallow and his hands stayed closed. He was thinking. She sat down beside him. This was not a thing she had planned to do. She had planned to ask him, standing, a set of practical questions about the bond ritual. She had a notebook. She intended to stand in the corridor and write things down. She sat on the floor beside him instead, her back against the stone, and for a while neither of them spoke. "Are you afraid of it?" she asked. He opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling. "Of the bond? Of being permanently connected to someone, without a choice about it." A long pause. "I have thought about it my whole life. Every Ashfall Alpha knows from childhood that the curse exists and that the bond is how it is resolved. I watched my father and my grandfather. The mate bond, when it is real, is not." He stopped, started again. "It is not a loss of something. That is what I grew up believing it would be. A subtraction, something taken from you. But watching my father—" "Your father," she said gently. "You said he completed the bond 2 hours before his death." "Yes. His mate was my mother. She died 11 years before him. He spent 11 years as a widower, knowing the bond was permanent, never once treating it as a burden." He turned his head to look at her, and the closeness of the floor and the stone and the dim corridor made his expression more visible than it was when they were across a table. He used to say she was still there, or in the way the bond works, a permanent bond, even after death, keeps something. A warmth, a memory of the other person's presence. She sat with that. "And you," she said. "You have been working toward this window for 10 years, waiting to find out who the mate would be." "Yes." "Did you imagine it would be a hunter?" The corner of his mouth moved. "I did not imagine it would be you specifically. No, but I want to tell you something." He turned his head to look at her again. "The 3 days I watched you in the forest, watching you work, watching you read the terrain and plan and adapt when the wind changed, the clarity of how you think. I was aware of what the bond meant before I walked into the trap. I was aware that you were the person the magic had identified, and I thought, before anything else, about what it meant or required. If it had to be anyone, I am glad it is someone like this." She looked at him. The corridor was cold. The fire in the main room was 2 levels up, and its warmth reached here only as a suggestion. The stone was hard and the light was poor. None of this seemed relevant. "I have been angry at everything supernatural since I was 7 years old," she said. "I know. I have built my entire professional identity on the premise that what you are is dangerous, and that dangerous things should be contained. That is not entirely wrong. And you specifically are, the apex of that. You are everything I was trained to neutralize. Also not wrong. So you understand why I need you to know that what I am about to say is entirely against my training, my history, and my professional judgment, and my better sense." He waited. "I do not think you are dangerous to me," she said. "I mean, you are dangerous. Objectively, you are one of the most physically dangerous things I have ever encountered. But I do not think you are dangerous to me specifically, and I do not know when that changed or how I feel about the fact that it has. But I thought you should know." He was very still. Then he reached out and placed his hand over hers, deliberate, unhurried, giving her every possible moment to move if she wanted to. She did not move. His hand was warm and his thumb rested lightly on the back of her wrist, in the exact place where the bond's blood exchange would be performed, which she was very carefully not thinking about. "The bond is permanent," she said. "Oh, yes." "Which means after the ritual, after we go down to that chamber and stop the curse, you would be tied to me for the rest of your life. An alpha who rules the northern packs would be bound to a hunter who has spent her adult life stopping wolves. The mate bond does not have a provision for finding its choices convenient," he said. "It does not care about history or profession. It cares about fundamental alignment, the kind of person you are underneath the things that formed you. And you—" He looked at her directly, with the full weight of those storm-grey eyes. "You are someone who reads a target's file for 4 hours and extracts the detail that exonerates them. You are someone who makes room at the table for absences you refuse to stop honouring. You are someone who looked at 43 wolves and 1,200 humans on a 6-week clock and felt personally responsible for them without being asked to." She looked at him for a long time. "We have one more day," she said finally, "before the Compact's team arrives." "I know. Then we should sleep," she said. "And in the morning, we make the final decision." She stood. She held out her hand. He took it, and she pulled him to his feet, and for a moment they stood in the corridor with their hands still joined and the cold stone around them and the old magic humming quietly 3 levels down. She let go first. She went upstairs. She heard him follow a few seconds later. She did not sleep for a long time. Chapter 8. The morning of the 4th day arrived like a verdict. She was awake before it was properly light, sitting at the main table with the Varek record open to a passage she had read 6 times. The relevant section was in the handwriting of his grandfather, who wrote with the precise economy of someone who had never learned to waste words. The acknowledgement must be spoken aloud by the alpha in the presence of his mate and in sight of the curse's marker. The words are not specified by the old magic because the old magic does not require performance. It requires truth. What must be spoken is a true acknowledgement that the bond exists, that the mate is seen, and that the alpha chooses, with full understanding of the permanent nature of the completion, to proceed. If the acknowledgement is false, if the alpha speaks it as obligation rather than as truth, the magic will not accept it. The bond will not complete. The curse will continue. She read this paragraph again. She was thinking about the word chooses. The old magic, according to 4 centuries of Ashfall records, was not a compulsion. It identified. It created the conditions. But the actual completion required an act of will from both parties. She heard him on the stairs. She had learned the specific weight of his footfall over 4 days in the way you learn the sound of a building you live in, involuntarily, completely. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had slept. He looked slightly less composed than usual, his hair less arranged, his eyes carrying the quality of a person who has woken up with a decision already made and now has to speak it in daylight, which is a different thing from making it in the dark. He came to the table and sat across from her. He looked at the Varek record, at the page it was open to. "You found the passage about truth," he said. "Your grandfather writes very clearly. He was a physics teacher before he inherited the alpha role. He believed in precision." He looked at the open page. "If I speak the acknowledgement as obligation, the magic will not accept it." "I know." "Which means you are asking whether I can speak it truthfully." She closed the book. "I am asking whether we can both speak it truthfully, because I believe the magic requires consent from both sides. The record is less explicit about the mate than the alpha, but the logic of the thing, requires that a forced bond would not hold, he finished. Yes, I have thought about that too. They sat with the morning coming through the narrow windows. I can speak it truthfully, he said. It was simple and direct, not a declaration, a statement of fact. I have been able to since the moment the bond settled in the forest. What I am asking you is, whether I can, she said. Yes. She looked at her hands, at the wrist where the blood exchange would happen. She thought about her mother at 31. She thought about 7 years old in a field at the margin of pack territory and the things she had carried since. She thought about a wolf king who made coffee for two and kept the second cup for the shape of company. She thought about the floor of a cold corridor and a hand placed over hers with the deliberate patience of someone who had decided to give her every choice. I came to this mountain to neutralize a threat, she said slowly. I came here with a briefing file and a kill order in reserve and 21 years of training that told me everything supernatural is something to be managed or destroyed, and I have sat in this fortress for 4 days and I have... She stopped. She started again. I have not found you manageable or destroyable. I have found you infuriating and honest and better at cooking than me and... A pause. I have found you someone I would like to keep knowing. That is not nothing. I do not know if it is sufficient for what the magic requires, but it is what is true. He was very still. Then he stood from the table and came around it, and she looked up at him, and he held out his hand with the same deliberate patience as the night in the corridor. She took it. He drew her to her feet. They stood close, closer than they had been in the corridor. June with no distance-sustaining darkness between them, just the plain winter morning and 4 feet of stone kitchen and the Varek record on the table and the hum of old magic 3 levels down. I want to tell you something, he said. Tell me. In the record, in my grandfather's section, he writes about his mate. He describes meeting her 3 days before the window. He says, I knew before the magic confirmed it. I knew because she was the first person in 10 years of being alpha who argued with me about something and was right, and who did not apologize for being right. He says that was the thing the magic was responding to, not fate in the abstract. A specific recognition. A person who fit. She looked at him. You have argued with me about 4 things in 4 days, he said, and you have been right about all 4 of them. I want you to know that I noticed that. Before anything else. The magic, and the curse, and the 43 wolves, and the 1,200 people. Before all of that I noticed that. She pulled his hand toward her and kissed him. It was not cautious. She was past caution with this man, and she knew it, and she did not pretend otherwise. She kissed him the way she did things she was committed to, fully, with her whole attention, and he responded in kind, his other hand moving to the side of her face with the same deliberate care he brought to everything. And beneath that care, something that was not careful at all. Something that had been waiting with the patience of stone and December cold and 4 centuries of obligation for exactly this. When they separated, both of them, she looked at him, and he looked at her. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then she said, Tonight. Tonight, he agreed. She picked up her notebook. She sat back down. She made 2 cups of coffee. She pushed one across the table to him. He sat across from her and drank it, and they spent the last morning before the ritual in the company of the specific warmth of 2 people who have crossed the threshold of something enormous and are choosing to be ordinary on the other side of it for exactly as long as the ordinary lasts. Chapter 9. The Compact's team arrived 6 hours early. She heard the vehicles at the base of the mountain road from half a mile. 4-wheel drive, military tyres, the specific engine note of compact assault vehicles. She was at the window with her secondary scope within 30 seconds of the first engine sound. 3 vehicles, 12 agents. And this was not a welfare check. This was an extraction team. She turned from the window. Zane was already standing in the centre of the main room. He had heard the vehicles before she did. How long? She asked. 20 minutes to the fortress at that road's condition. Less if they know the shortcut through the eastern ridge. She ran the numbers. The ritual required the acknowledgement, the blood exchange, the breath, and the 3 minutes of joined contact in the circle. Total estimated time. 8 minutes, assuming no interruption and no hesitation. She had 12 minutes. Move, she said. They moved. Down through the main room, down to the kitchen, down through the larder, 3 levels below into the cold stone chamber with the inscribed walls and the paired symbols and the plinth and the Varek record which she carried under her arm. She set the record on the plinth. She stood inside the outer circle. He stood across from her, inside the inner ring, at the center of the paired symbols. There was no ceremony, no preparation, only the two of them, and the stone, and the magic that had been waiting in this chamber for 400 years, and the sound of engines on the mountain road above. "Speak it," she said. He looked at her. He stood with the stillness of something that had made its decision long ago and was only now saying it aloud. "I am Zane of Ashfall, Alpha of the Northern Packs, heir to this bloodline and its obligations." His voice was even and deep, and the chamber caught it and held it. "In the presence of the curse's marker, I acknowledge the mate bond. I acknowledge Seraphina Voss, not as obligation, not as curse resolution, not because the magic requires it, because she is the first person I have encountered in 31 years of living who is exactly as she appears, because she argues correctly and reads evidence fairly and makes room at the table for absences she refuses to stop honouring, because she is brave in the specific way that costs something, and she is still brave anyway." He held her eyes. "I choose the bond. I choose her. That is my acknowledgement. That is true." The inscriptions on the walls brightened, not with visible light, but with the specific quality of something becoming more present, as if the words had been there all along and were now being read by something that had been waiting to read them. She stepped forward into the inner circle. She picked up the small ceremonial blade from the plinth. She had not noticed it was there before the magic put it in her sight. She drew it across the inside of her left wrist. A thin line, a bead of blood. She held it out. He did the same. Their wrists met. The blood exchange was warm. She had expected cold. The stone was cold. The air was cold. The whole mountain was cold. But where their wrists touched, there was a warmth that moved up her arm and settled in her chest. A warmth that was not painful, but was definitive. The feeling of a door closing not because you are locked in, but because you have come home. They were very close now. Close enough that his breath was visible when he exhaled, and hers was visible too. "Breath," she said. He leaned forward and she leaned forward, and they shared a single breathing space. The same air moving between them, his exhale, her inhale, her exhale, his, one continuous exchange. It lasted 15 seconds. It felt like something much longer. Then she lifted her free hand and placed it in his, and they stood. The 3 minutes in the old counting were longer than 3 minutes in the modern sense. She had read this in the record, had calculated that the old counting was closer to 4.5 minutes by contemporary measurement. She stood in the chamber with Zane's hand in hers, and the blood still warm on her wrist, and the magic brightening in the walls, and the sound of compact vehicles somewhere above them, and she was not afraid. She was many things. She was uncertain about what the next 6 months of her life would look like. She was furious about what the compact had done. She was still in some unresolved chamber of herself, the 7-year-old in the field margin. She was the hunter who had built her identity on distance and precision and not needing company. But she was not afraid. She looked at him. He was looking at her with the full weight of his attention. Everything he was, every century of obligation and loss and strength and restraint, looking at her with the particular quality of a person who has arrived somewhere they were afraid they would never reach. The bond completed. She felt it, not as a dramatic event, but as a shift in equilibrium, like a building settling on its foundation. A rightness. Something that had been slightly misaligned clicking into place. The inscriptions blazed white for 3 seconds and went dark. Not dark, as in extinguished. Dark, as in done. Finished. Resolved. The curse was over. She exhaled. Above them, the sound of the compact vehicles had reached the fortress. Chapter 10. She came up out of the chamber into the larder with the Varek record under her arm, Zane at her back, and the full weight of what had just happened settling into her body the way cold settles into stone. Slowly, completely, and then, permanently. The compact team had the front door open. She could hear them in the entry corridor, measured footsteps, the specific communication cadence of trained operatives moving through a structure. 6 agents visible. She estimated the other 6 were covering the perimeter. She opened the larder door and walked out. The lead agent stopped. His name was Crane. She had worked with him twice and he was good, genuinely good, which meant he was not going to do anything reckless, but he was also not going to be told a story. "Voss," he said, "stand down." "I am standing," she said calmly, "and I need you to do something before you do anything else. The asset, his name is Zane Ashfall, and he is standing behind me, and you are not going to touch him until you have spoken to Director Halverson, not Devereaux, Halverson. When you call her, you are going to tell her that I have documentation in 3 independent hands that implicates a division operative in the falsification of the Coldmere incident report. You are going to tell her that the Ashfall pack has been clean and that the Class 7 designation was manufactured. And you are going to tell her. Crane raised his hand. He looked at her for a long time. She held the look. "You have been dark for 4 days, Voss. Devereaux has been... Devereaux is compromised." She said it flatly. Not with drama, as a fact. "I have documentation. Call Halverson." Another long look. Then Crane stepped back and pulled out his secure phone. Zane had not moved behind her. He was standing with his hands loose at his sides and his attention moving through the room. She could feel the bond now like a warmth she had not known she was cold without. Not intrusive. Not possessive. Just present, the way her own heartbeat was present. The call took 7 minutes. When Crane came back, his expression had changed with the specific flatness of someone who has been told something that requires them to reverse course and is doing so without self-pity. "Halverson wants a full debrief within 48 hours, he said. "Devereaux has been suspended pending review. The Coldmere files have been pulled." He looked past her at Zane. "Halverson says the asset is released pending investigation. Ashfall, that means you are not going anywhere until this is resolved, but you are not in custody." "Understood," Zane said. Crane looked back at Serafina. "You want to tell me what actually happened up here?" "In the debrief," she said. "All of it. In the debrief." He nodded once and began organising the retreat. Within 20 minutes, the agents had completed their assessment and were reorganising at the vehicles. Crane paused at the door. "Voss." "Yes." "Whatever happened here, and I have a fairly clear idea of part of it." He looked at her, and at Zane and back at her, with the expression of a professional who has seen enough of the world to recognise when 2 things that should not be true are both true. "For what it is worth, you called it right. You always call it right." He left. The fortress was quiet. She stood in the main room and felt the particular silence of a space that has been fully occupied and has now emptied. The kind of silence that has texture, that tells you something about the volume it replaced. Zane came to stand beside her. They looked out the narrow window at the mountain in the early afternoon light. The snow was still. The forest below was still. The border zones, she knew, though she could not see them from here, were still. The curse had lifted quietly, whereas something that has been present for 4 centuries might lift, not with fanfare, but with the profound and unremarked naturalness of a long tension releasing. "The border wolves," she said. "My second will have noticed the change already." She has been monitoring. The people in Cold Hollow and Wernsberg will wake up tomorrow and not know why they slept better than they have in a month. They will not know why it stopped. They will just notice that it did. She nodded. A long quiet. The compact investigation will take months, she said. Yes, and you will have been shown to have called the corruption correctly. That is not a career-ending position. It is a complicated one. And you are someone who handles complicated things. He looked at her. What do you want? Not what you are trained for. Not what your professional circumstances require. What do you want? She thought about this honestly. She was not accustomed to giving herself permission for the honest version of this question. I want to finish what my mother started, she said slowly. She believed the violence was solvable. She had been building toward a methodology, documentation protocols, early warning systems, cross-species communication frameworks, that died with her. I have her notes. I have her data. I have been carrying it for 22 years and not doing anything with it because... She stopped. Because finishing it would require working with wolves, Zane said, quietly, accurately. Yes. He was quiet for a long moment. The Ashfall Pack has a research archive, historical records of border incidents going back 6 generations, pack accounts, or the wolf side of events your mother might have been trying to document. There is also... He paused, and something moved in his expression that was tentative in a way she had not seen from him, which she found both surprising and disarming. There is also a position, in the pack structure, for a border liaison. It has been empty since my father created it for my mother's last research partner, who retired 8 years ago. The position is... He stopped. Are you offering me a job? She said. I am offering you infrastructure, he said carefully. Resources. Access. People who have the other half of the data your mother was building toward. The rest of it, what that looks like, what you choose to do with it, is entirely your decision. She looked at him. You would let a hunter into the Ashfall archive. I would let you into the Ashfall archive. He held her gaze. Those are different sentences. She looked back out at the mountain. The afternoon light was moving across the snow in long, pale angles. The specific light of December that is cold and beautiful and does not pretend to be either more or less than what it is. She thought about her mother's notes, 2 boxes of them in a storage unit in the city, 22 years of being carried and not opened because opening them required more than she had known how to spare. She thought about the paired symbols on the chamber floor, mirror images, incomplete without each other. There are things you should know about me, she said, before we work out what permanent looks like, things I have not told you. I know, he said. There are things I have not told you either. We have time. We have time, she repeated. It was a strange sentence. She was not accustomed to the idea of having time. She had spent her entire adult life in the framework of missions, definitive tasks with endings, objectives met, operations closed. Time as an open thing was unfamiliar. I need to go to the city for the debrief, she said. I know. And you need to go back to your pack. Yes. And then, she stopped. And then was not a sentence she had a ready ending for. And then covered the investigation, the compact's restructuring, the Vantara exposure, the border framework her mother had believed was possible. And then covered 43 wolves who did not know how close they had come, 1,200 people who would sleep better tonight without knowing why. And then covered a bond that settled in her chest like something that had always been there, only she had not known to feel for it. And then, Zane said, completing the sentence the only way it could honestly be completed, we figure the rest out. Together. She looked at him. She had captured him 100 yards from here with a chain and a pressure plate and a 3-kilo explosive buried in the snow. She had brought him into a fortress she had designed to hold wolves. She had intended to hand him over without a second thought. She had not anticipated any of this. She was not, on reflection, sure she would change any of it. Together, she said. She turned from the window and went to pack her things. He went to send word to his second. The fortress settled around them, stone and cold and the faint warmth of a fire still burning. And outside the mountain was white and wide and absolutely quiet, the way mountains are quiet after something that has been building for a long time has finally come to rest. Channel close. You have just finished The Alpha's Curse, a complete story from Enchanted Secrets Publishing. Step into the moonlight, stay for the romance. If you made it to the final word, and we know you did, because once Serafina and Zane get their hands on each other's stories, it is essentially impossible to stop. Then you already know exactly what Enchanted Secrets Publishing delivers. Stories that do not let you go. Romances that bite. Curses that have nothing to do with inconvenience and everything to do with the one person in the world you are not supposed to want. Here is the truth about subscribing to this channel. You will never run out of stories. We release complete audiobooks, full stories, beginning to end, so you are never left hanging at the moment when someone is about to make a terrible and magnificent decision. You gain access to our full library the moment you subscribe. You gain early notification every time a new story is posted, which means you will always be the first in the room when the next Enemies to Lovers Wolf King makes his entrance. You also gain something rarer, community. The listeners at Enchanted Secrets Publishing are readers who take their romance seriously, who are here for the slow burn and the tension and the moment when the hunter finally admits that she walked into this particular trap willingly. People who understand that the best love stories are the ones where both parties had every reason not to fall, and they fell anyway. Subscribe now. Ring the notification bell. We mean it, because new stories arrive when you least expect them and most need them, and the bell is the difference between being first and finding out a week later that you missed the one written for you. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you thought of Serafina. Tell us what you thought of Zane. Tell us if the moment in the corridor on the third night kept you up later than it should have. We read every single one. We will be here. We will always be here, with new worlds, new wolves, new loves that should never have happened and could not be stopped. Step into the moonlight. Stay for the romance.